Welcome to another in the series of virtual walks by the Great Yarmouth Heritage Guides. This virtual walk does not follow a specific route, but places of historic interest pertaining to the Great Yarmouth witch trials of 1645 and the events that took place 47 years later in America. We start our journey across the border in the county of Suffolk, then heading back to Great Yarmouth and the Toll House. We then journey on to North Deans to the site of the town gibbet, before sailing across the Atlantic Ocean to Salem, Massachusetts. Matthew Hopkins was born in the village of Great Yarmouth, Suffolk in 1620 to Puritan parents. His father was the minister of St. John's Church, Great Yarmouth, which still stands today. Not much is known about Hopkins during his short life, as he passed away from tuberculosis on August the 12th, 1647. But during his short life, he became a landowner, a tavern owner, a twice-failed lawyer, and his final title was the self-imposed Witchfinder General. Being brought up in the Puritan faith instilled beliefs within Hopkins that carried on with him throughout his life. One of those beliefs was that women were more susceptible to evil doing than men. It was in 1645 that he met John Stern, 10 years his senior, who also shared Hopkins' views. A few months after meeting John Stern, himself and Hopkins managed to gain the trust of the watchers of the witch trial of Elizabeth Clark in Essex, in the town of Manningtree, where Hopkins was living at the time. It was during these trials that Hopkins, Stern, and a midwife named Mary Phillips carried out despicable torture on one Elizabeth Clark, who was accused of witchcraft. 18 women were hanged during this particular witch trial in Essex. Shortly after the Essex witch trials, Hopkins and Stern both gained permission and a warrant from the Earl of Hardwicke to preside over more of the witch trials within the Essex area. It was then that Hopkins gave himself the self-professed title of Witchfinder General. From 1645 to 1647, Hopkins and Stern travelled all throughout East Anglia, presiding over witch trials throughout Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex and Cambridgeshire. They always gained permission from whichever towns they sought to seek out witches, and they also charged for the privilege too. They charged £23 per town, which is equivalent to £4,000 today. Matthew Hopkins and John Stern arrived in Great Yarmouth on the 10th of September 1645, and accusations soon started to arise. Originally, only 15 people were accused of witchcraft within the town. 4 of those were released without charge, and 11 were put on trial. It was on the 10th of September 1645, in a general session of the court at the Toll House, that the 11 accused were brought before the bailiffs, the burgesses, and Miles Corbett, the recorder, and the justices of the peace. They were also brought before grand jurymen and the local constables. One of the 11 people accused was a woman called Elizabeth Bradwell, and this is an account during the trial. In the year 1644, at Yarmouth, there was an old woman who used to be relieved twice a week at Mr. Whitfield's door, who made this confession. that she, using to work for a Mr. Moulton, who was a stocking merchant and alderman of the town, went to his house for work, but he being from home, his man refused to let her have any till his master came home, which was not expected in less than a fortnight's time. Whereupon, being exasperated against this man, she applied herself to the maid and desired some knitting work of her. And when she returned the like answer, she went home in great discontent and anger against them both. That night, when she was in bed, Bradwell heard one knock at her door, and rising to her window she saw, it being moonlight, a tall black man there, and asking what would he have. He told her that he understood that she was discontented because she could not get work as she expected, and that he would put her into a way that she should never want either work or anything else. Whereupon she let him in, and asked him what he had to say to her. He told her he must first see her hand, and then taking out something like a penknife, he gave it a little scratch, so that blood flowed, and the mark remained to that time, which she then shewed them. Then he took some of the blood in a pen, and pulling a book out of his pocket, bid her write her name. And when she said she could not, he said he would guide her hand, and thereupon did so, and wrote her name in his book. When this was done, he bid her now ask what she would have, and when she desired first to be revenged of the man, he promised to give her an account of it the next night, and so leaving her some money, went away for that time. The next night he came to her again, and told her he could do nothing against the man, for he went constantly to church to hear Whitfield and Brinsley, and said his prayers morning and evening. She then desired him to revenge her on the maid, and he again promised to give her an account thereof the next night. But then he said the same of the maid, and that therefore he could not hurt her. But, he said, there was a young child in the house, which was more easy to deal with, whereupon she desired him to do what he could against it. And the next night he came again, and brought with him an image of wax, and told her they must go and bury that in the churchyard, and then the child which he had put into great pain already should waste and consume away as that image wasted. Whereupon they went together, and he dug a hole with a spade, and which be brought with him, and they buried it. And when he left her, he told her that whenever she wanted anything, but wished for him to come, and he would presently be with her. The child having at this time lain in an anguishing condition for about 18 months, and being very near to death, the minister sent this woman with this account to the magistrates, who thereupon sent her to Mr. Moulton's, where in the same room where the child lay almost dead, she would again be examined concerning the particulars aforesaid, all which she confessed again, and had no sooner done, but the child, who was but 3 years old, and was thought to be dead or dying, laughed and began to stir and raise up itself, and from that instant began to recover. It was then late in the night before they had done, so that they could not search for the image of wax, but ordered it to be done early the next morning. And then the woman being led to the churchyard, set her foot upon a certain place, and said that was the place where it was buried. But though they dug and sought for it as well as they could find nothing, whether because it was so wasted that they lost the relics of it in the digging, or removed by the devil, or whatever else was the reason, it could not be found, but the child recovered. This woman and all the rest were convicted upon their own confessions, and were condemned and executed accordingly. They had all their familiars, and Elizabeth Bradwell's did usually appear in the form of a blackbird. Elizabeth Bradwell was one of the 6 found guilty of witchcraft. Her crimes were the feeding and entertaining of evil spirits, use of sorceries and witchcraft to bewitch spinster Susanna Linstead and the child Henry Moulton, of Alderman John Moulton. Johanna Lacey, accused of the feeding and entertaining of evil, despicable spirits, found guilty. Elizabeth Dudgeon, the feeding and entertaining of evil, despicable spirits, found guilty. Maria Blackburn, the feeding and entertaining of evil, despicable spirits, found guilty. Brigitta Howard, the feeding and entertaining of evil spirits, found guilty. Alice Cliswell, the feeding and entertaining of evil, despicable spirits, found guilty. Mark Prime, a gardener of Great Yarmouth, accused of using diabolical arts and witchcraft on the 12th of April 1645, did diabolically and feloniously bewitch Robert Howlett, the son of John Howlett, and used his charms and sorceries to find lost property, not guilty. Maria Vervey, 5 indictments of bewitching the infants Elizabeth Holmes, Lucy Lambert and Augustine Thrower, Bridget Wade, the wife of Hosier John Wade, and the entertaining and feeding of evil spirits. She was found not guilty. Others accused but found not guilty were Nazareth Fassett, Elizabeth Linstead, and Mark Prime. Mark Wilkinson and Mark Price were also accused of witchcraft, but the charges were dropped. All 6 women who were found guilty of witchcraft were sentenced to hang by the neck until dead, and were imprisoned for 2 months until their last day, where they were taken from the toll house in Great Yarmouth to White Farm, which now stands near the site of Yarmouth Heliport. 5 women were then led to the Great Yarmouth gibbet that stood on North Deans and is now where Jellicoe Road stands. Alice Cliswell, Brigitta Howard, Maria Blackburn, Elizabeth Dudgeon and Elizabeth Bradwell all died from hanging from the gibbet in December of 1645. Johanna Lacey escaped the hangman's noose as she was considered too old to waste the hangman's rope on. Prior to the executions of these women, there would have been certain torture methods used. Although torture was considered illegal during this time in England, Hopkins and Stern were known to use torture methods in order to extract confessions. Some of these were sleep and food deprivation, isolation, forced exercise, and a pricking of a witch, in which a knife with a retractable blade was pressed against the skin of the accused, as it was thought that a witch could not bleed. These people were also examined by a midwife, either from the local town or by Mary Phillips, who travelled with Hopkins and Stern, to see if there was any moles or witches' marks. In the case of Elizabeth Bradwell, she had a small mark on the palm of her hand where the aforementioned blackbird used to feed from. Another method in getting witches to confess, or whether they were presumed innocent or guilty, was to swim a witch. A rope would be tied around their middle. They would be sat in a cross-legged position with their little finger tied to the opposite big toe. They were then thrown into a body of water, and if they sank, it was thought that they were innocent, and they would hope to be pulled out quickly before they drowned. However, if they floated, it showed that these women were guilty, and therefore would meet the hangman's noose. We are not sure if any of these torture methods were used on the accused within Great Yarmouth, but we do know that Hopkins and Stern did use these methods in other witch trials throughout East Anglia. Hopkins and Stern continued to travel throughout East Anglia for a further 2 years, until on August the 12th, 1647, Hopkins died from tuberculosis. John Stern then went on to write a book called A Discovery of Witches, which was prominent in another horrific witch trial which went on in America in 1692. We now travel across the Atlantic Ocean to Salem, Massachusetts, where a further group of 3 Yarmouth women were also accused and 2 were hanged for the crime of witchcraft during the infamous Salem witch trials. The Town family came to Massachusetts in 1640 before moving to Salem in 1651. They had originated and had been born within the town of Great Yarmouth, and their names appear in the Minster Parish records. Joanna Town, the mother, was accused of witchcraft in 1670, but she was never tried for the crime. Her daughter, Mary Easty, was accused of using her spirit to afflict various people and families within the town of Salem. She was found guilty and hanged on September the 22nd, 1692. Her other sister, Sarah Cloyce, was also accused of the same crime, and at the same time as her sister Mary Easty. However, she managed to escape the hangman's noose and was released in January of 1693. The last sister to be accused of witchcraft was Rebecca Nurse, who was the oldest of the town sisters at 73 years old. She was arrested in March of 1692 after being accused by the Putnam family. Nurse's arrest and accusations came as a shock to the town of Salem, as Nurse was seen as a pious pillar of the community, and the rumour of accusation was because the Putnams wanted to purchase the land that Nurse lived on with her husband and her children. At her trial in June 1692, Nurse was found not guilty after a petition was raised to release her. However, after the verdict was read by the judge, the accusers started having fits of spirits and claiming to be pricked by Rebecca Nurse's spirit, and the verdict was very quickly changed to guilty. Rebecca Nurse was hanged on July the 19th, 1692. Arthur Miller, who wrote the play The Crucible, based his play on Rebecca Nurse's testimony and trial, and she was the second woman to be hanged at Salem. Within the town of Salem itself, there are memorials to Rebecca Nurse and Mary Easty. Rebecca Nurse's homestead now stands within the town as a museum. Sarah Cloyce, the sister who escaped the noose, was offered compensation, and the play 3 Coins for Sarah was also very popular. There is also a plaque to the Town family within St Nicholas Minster. It was placed there after fundraising by the Town family in California and was unveiled in 2011. We hope that you have enjoyed this virtual walk, and we hope to see you on one of our guided heritage walks in the near future.